Praise God. Hope you're having a blessed day today. Let's get back into our next devotion here. And as I'm going into this one today, I'm finished with what I was working on last week, and we were talking about the anti-Semitism, and we took and did actually 3 devotions on that one. And we were talking about how the mistreatment of Jewish people and how it's going to lead right from the past to the present to the future, how it's leading right up into the end times and the tribulation period. Today I want to also continue along and continue to talk about the current events and end times as well, kind of mix the two together and bring the two together, because I think the things that are happening right now are very interwoven and intertwined with what's coming in the very near future. And what we're seeing going on is laying the foundation, is laying the framework for what we're going to see in the tribulation period. Now, as far as how this relates to current events, many of you have probably heard this saying in the last, especially the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years of our country. It's really become prevalent, I guess, since the time that Donald Trump was president, and then right on up to the current time. Donald Trump, he got his critics very stirred up when he would say things like fake news. Maybe you remember hearing him say that. I think if he said it once, he said it 1,000 times. Fake news, fake news. He would point at his rallies. Look at all the fake news back there. The fake news is going to report this. And you know, he really got people mad. The news media were really mad at him. He actually made them a whole lot of money because their ratings went way up when he was president, because they loved to cover him and cover negative things about him. In fact, they still are covering and talking about the former president. They still haven't gotten over him, so to speak, and now he's even running for president again, we've heard. Well, the fake news, turned into whose version of the truth, and that's always been, who has the correct version of the truth. Now, the big thing you hear a lot about is not necessarily fake news, but you hear the word misinformation. I think if I could get you to raise your hand, everybody probably watching this would raise their hand and say, oh yeah, I've heard that term. And I've heard it quite a bit. If you watch the news any length of time, you hear that. If you listen to politics, the president speaker, the press secretary, or whoever it is, you hear that term, misinformation. It's a very well-known term now. And you go on Facebook and some of the other social platforms, and they have things built in there that triggers, you just certain words. If you just punch them in, you talk about COVID, and you talk about COVID in a negative way, or the COVID vaccines in a negative way, or something like that, you can get marked. Your Facebook and your post can get marked, or they might even take it down as misinformation. Fact checkers, it'll come on there. The fact checkers have fact this and found something wrong with your statement, or something such as that. That has happened about not just the vaccines, but about a host of things. Just in the last year before the last election, there was so much propaganda being put forth by the government, by government officials. And when I think about propaganda and the things that were being put forth and the lies, and that's what they were, they're lies. Propaganda, that's what that is. Propaganda really has been around for a long time, but it really became in the forefront back in World War II, when the propaganda minister of Germany, Joseph Goebbels, was front and center in spreading lies and discord for the Third Reich. And the people of Germany, many of them were just swept away with this propaganda. There was an underlying of anti-Semitism already in Germany, and already in the world for that matter. And so Adolf Hitler and his main little core group there, they started spreading this propaganda, And Joseph Goebbels, he got on social media, just like we have social media today. It wasn't as advanced back then, but the radio was a thing that people really liked and people really listened to. And so he would get on the radio and he would go on air, and he would talk very negative and say very negative things about Jewish people. And he would talk about, how Germany was oppressed and all these other things. And how, certain people were going to, doing bad things to them, and certain things, pitting one side against the other and dividing people. And, a lot hasn't changed. We still see that today. Democrats plotting against, trying to turn people against Republicans, Republicans against Democrats, and so forth. It's always good and refreshing when you hear a voice that tries to unify people and bring people together. Well, the whole thing about disinformation, the whole thing about this propaganda, I want to tie it in with something that is going to happen. And all of this, I believe, lays the framework and the groundwork for the tribulation period. And the tribulation period, where the Antichrist comes on the scene, and the Antichrist begins to spread misinformation that's really detrimental to society. And I think some of these things that are being spread today are very detrimental to society. When you hear things like, children don't know their own gender, we've got to teach them their gender. When we teach things about life not beginning in the womb, that, it's all health care and it's all right to kill the child in the womb. When you hear, just different things you hear being spread, and there's a whole list of them, my goodness. And sometimes the pictures are right there in front of us, but yet at the same time, people say there's nothing to see here. You remember, in the summer of 2020, how many times, the reporters would get up and you can go back and watch this on YouTube. You can pull up the clips. I'm not spreading nothing here that's not true. I mean, there would be clips of literally reporters from different agencies, CNN and so forth, and they would say, "Oh, this is all pretty much peaceful protest, just a very peaceful protest out here." And literally, they would be cars and trucks on fire behind them. Buildings would be on fire. The police would be out there. All of this stuff going on, and they would be out there and saying, "What you're seeing is not real. Just believe what we're telling you." And what we're telling you is, this and this and this. And well, I'm sure that there was some peaceful people out there. No doubt there was. But, people can see things with their own eyes. And when you see buildings on fire and you see cars on fire and you see people attacking policemen and so forth, hey, that's real. When people say what happened on January 6th in 2021, January 6th, when the Capitol was overrun with protesters, and people say, well, that was just pretty much just peaceful people, they were all peaceful. Well, they weren't all peaceful, I can tell you that. If they would all been peaceful, they'd have been on the outside, wouldn't have been on the inside. If they'd all been peaceful, they wouldn't have been running over and fighting with the police. If they'd all been peaceful, they wouldn't have had to, do what they were doing, so to speak. Were some of those people peaceful? Of course they were. But not all of them. Not even, no way or no. I can see with my own eyes what's happening. And yes, I know that story's been distorted and many other things over and over again. But what I am trying to say is we can be shown something right there in front of us, and at the same time we're told something different. And it is amazing how many people believe not what they're seeing, but what somebody's telling them. Don't believe what you're seeing, believe what we're saying. If I can see something in front of me, if I see something burning and on fire, if I see people overrunning a building, if I see people attacking police, whether it's in the summer of 2020, whether it's in, January 6th riots, I see it. I see what it is. I know what it is. I'm not being tricked or fooled, so to speak. When I see these things happening, I see these things taking place, I've got enough sense to understand. Now, I don't care if the president comes out and says, the people, they're rioting and they're out there in the streets and they've got a right to riot and all of them are mostly peaceful, but I'm seeing cities being burned. Yeah, I know that something's not right with that. When I see, people storming the Capitol and people are saying, well, these are all peaceful, there's something not quite right with that either. So I've got enough sense to understand, what I'm seeing and so forth, and research it for myself and understand it, not just believe the mouthpiece of somebody reporting something. Well, in the tribulation period, the Antichrist is really going to use this to his advantage. This social media will be used to the advantage of the Antichrist, and much more the false prophet. Now, the false prophet is talked about in Revelation chapter 13. Now, the Antichrist comes on the scene, and the Antichrist receives his power from the dragon, the devil, the beast, so to speak. And the Antichrist will come upon the scene, and he will have a mouthpiece. And this mouthpiece is talked about in Revelation chapter 13, verse number 11. And John said, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, And he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. He deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast who had a wound by a sword and did live. So you see here, there's a mouth, but we call this the false prophet. The first beast, of course, we call the Antichrist. The second one here we call the false prophet. And it's interesting how his mission is to convince everyone to worship the beast. He convinces everyone basically that the Antichrist is Christ, that he is the Messiah. He is the one that's going to solve the problems. Now, not that he's going to try to convince people that he's the Messiah that died on a cross and died and rose again, that he's Jesus Christ. No, not that. It's going to be the Antichrist. It's going to be the one that Revelations talks about when the first 4 seals are broken, the first 4 riders of the horsemen. The first rider there being the rider of the white horse, which is not Jesus Christ coming upon the earth on the Battle of Armageddon. That's not to the end of the book of Revelation. But this is at the beginning. You see the rider of the white horse coming, so forth. And all the others that follow him, the red and the black and the pale and all of those, war and death and all the other, the pestilence and all of these other things that follow the first rider. Now, saying all of those things, let's kind of hone this in here for just a moment. This false prophet will be able to spread propaganda much better than Joseph Goebbels did of the Third Reich, much better than Baghdad Bob did in the Iraq War. Some of you remember him, who literally would come out there and say each day that the Iraqi army was winning and the Americans were running and so forth, when it was the exact opposite. He'll be much better than the propaganda of the news media today that comes out and tries to convince you that good is evil and evil is good. That's what they're doing today. And they're doing a good job of it. Not that I'm trying to pat them on the back, but they have got people convinced, especially younger people. My goodness, how many younger people I would say from anywhere from 13 to 14 right on up to 40 years old. They have got them convinced that the world's fixing to end with climate change. Got to get rid of all the fossil fuels. Can't have any of these things anymore, that we've had in the past that's alleviated poverty from so many millions, I would say even billions of people, and raised their standard of living, that we've got to go back to all, to solar panels and wind power and electric cars and all of these things. And if we don't, the oceans are going to rise, and just horrible things are going to take place. All the polar ice caps are going to melt, and so forth and so on. It's going to get so hot that everybody's going to burn up, and right on down the line, flooding and storms and all this. And I've talked before about how that's going to fit into the end times as well. People are going to say some of the things that are happening during the tribulation period is because of climate change. And if we'd have just fixed things back then, we wouldn't have this today, which is going to be more propaganda. But we see the propaganda happening, and we see it going on. And my goodness, it is convincing. We've got a whole generation of people now that are convinced, because we've taught them in school. They've been taught in school about global warming, about climate change, and we don't understand. We looked at the danger of other things being taught in school, and there have been real dangers about gender identity and things like that, and those things, and the critical race theory. Those things are very dangerous as well. But we've missed some of this whole thing with the whole climate change. It is very dangerous. And so our kids come up, and we think, well, it's all right when they believe these things and go after these things. Well, it's not, because they're also believing a lie. And you're seeing these things. And could the Antichrist use some of this whole green agenda to promote, his message and so forth? Well, I can see that. I can see that happening. And you know what we're being told about, racism in America, and the different, like I said, good being called evil, evil being called good. The crooks, the bad guys that are out there harming, hurting society are really not that bad, but the policemen, they're all the bad guys. And we know there are a few bad policemen, of course, in anything. And there may be some people that are accused of doing something that didn't do it. But by and large, the people committing the crimes, they're the bad guys. And the people in the uniforms, they're the good guys. But if you watch social media today and watch the news, you'd be just about convinced it's the other way around. That the police are all the bad guys and the crooks are all the good guys. Good being called evil, evil being called good. Light being called darkness, darkness being called light. Those things have to come to pass. And you have to have a mouthpiece spewing these things. And so the social media. Now, years ago, we didn't have Facebook and Instagrams and Twitters and all these the TikToks and all these other media where people could get on and instantly affect a great number of people. I mean, very quickly. I mean, it can start spread. You can start the lie. And, it can be somebody that's got a lot of followers, maybe, let's just say somebody like President Trump or LeBron James or somebody like that that's got a lot of followers on social media. And so what happens? Well, they post something, whoever it is. And I'm not just saying it's those two, but it could be anybody. Well, they post something. Well, their followers see it, and so they repost it. And so let's say a person's got 10 million followers or 50, whatever it is. He's got 10 million followers, so he posts it, and so that person posts it, and so all of a sudden then these followers who have followers of themselves, they start posting this, and then it gets posted again. And it goes what we call viral. It goes out, and now it's all over the place, and it's had hundreds and hundreds of millions of views. And all of a sudden now, the media has picked up these lies and so forth, and maybe they're the ones that promoted it in the first place. And now, they're telling the lies, and the story gets spread, and then all of a sudden, everybody's like, well, hey, if you don't believe this, you're a racist. If you don't believe this, you're a whatever phobia it is. If you don't believe this, boy, you're wrong. If you don't believe this climate change, it can be one picture that somebody posts on there of a polar bear sitting on a little iceberg that's floating in the water, and somebody put down there, everything's melting, all the polar ice caps are melting, and the polar bears ain't got nothing to eat no more, and they're all dying, and all of this, and somebody posts a little picture, and the picture goes viral. That's a crude example, but that's what happens. And when that happens, you say, well, how do you fight that? It's very hard to fight it. Because when these things get posted, they don't get flagged and they don't get brought down. But you let somebody post the truth on there about something, and they'll get flagged, and they will get brought down many times. They will get flagged and get brought down from social media. I tell you, I can see the false prophet, I can see the Antichrist using these platforms to promote the one world order, to promote the one world currency, everybody being on the same page. We've got to all fight this together. We all got to do this together. We all got to worship this together. We all got to do this and this and this and this. I can see that coming up. I can see that happening. And I see it because of what I see, this whole thing about misinformation. I may have to do another one on this because I've got a lot more to say, and I've got already almost 20 minutes here. Thank you for listening. God bless you. We'll do another one here, and because I got a little bit more to say how this ties into the Word of God. God bless you. Hope you have a blessed day.